Women have it easy, huh? Just say you're dealing with menopause, and you can take a break from work and housework. I couldn't hide my boiling anger at my husband's insensitive words. The changes in my body started to appear when I was over 50. I was diagnosed with menopause 2 years ago at a hospital. For these 2 years, I've suffered from various symptoms like dizziness, palpitations, and hot flashes. Despite receiving treatment, the symptoms have only eased. There's no complete cure. My husband, who has been living in the same house, has never tried to understand my illness. Dizziness? Getting tired easily? Back pain? Everyone gets that as they age. And then you use menopause as an excuse to take a break from work and spend the whole day in bed. Oh, how I envy you. My husband threw these words at me when I couldn't even stand up because of my dizziness. He maliciously interpreted my medically advised leave of absence as taking a break for a trivial illness. He has repeatedly insulted and sneered at my incurable condition. But today was different. He looked down on me with a look of utter disdain and laughed mockingly. If you have time to complain about being sick, at least do the housework that a wife should do. I'm Holly, 52 years old. I've been living with my husband, Ken, who is 3 years older than me. We met through a mutual acquaintance in our late 20s and hit it off right away. We continued our relationship smoothly and got married in our early 30s. Although we occasionally had minor arguments, Ken was kind, and we both worked hard at our jobs while living a peaceful life. We don't have children, but I thought we had been getting along well, supporting each other as a couple. However, a significant change appeared in our marriage a few years ago. Even after marriage, I continued working as a full-time employee, but I'm currently on a leave of absence. The reason is poor health. More specifically, I started showing symptoms of menopause in my late 40s, which made me prone to falling ill. Initially, my symptoms were primarily irregular menstrual cycles and sudden hot flashes and tiredness, but as time went by, my palpitations worsened and I had sleepless nights. Eventually, I began to experience irritability and depression for no reason, affecting my mental health. Menopause can cause various symptoms for about 10 years, from before to after menopause. I had heard about it, but experiencing it myself was much harder than I imagined. My symptoms were particularly severe, and on the advice of my family, I started visiting a hospital, but I haven't recovered at all. Doctors say that menopause involves various symptoms, so there's no specific cure, and treatment is mainly symptomatic. Therefore, I've been using prescribed medications and herbal remedies, but there's no cure. The symptoms have only eased temporarily. It became difficult to continue working, so I decided to take a leave of absence when I turned 50, 2 years ago. My company allows a leave of absence for up to 3 years, and I'm nearing the time when I have to decide whether to return to work or resign. I don't want to quit my job, but there's no sign that my symptoms will subside, and I might have to consider resigning, which frustrates me. However, I'm unsure what Ken would say if I ended up quitting. Initially, Ken was worried and took care of me when I first became ill with menopause. He wasn't one to take the initiative in doing housework, but he used to be considerate when I was unwell. I thought he was a kind person, but as soon as he realized my health issue might drag on, he started looking at me with annoyance. When I discussed wanting to temporarily take a leave of absence from work with Ken, he wasn't pleased. I don't understand much about your health, but is it so bad that you have to take a leave? You're not just slacking off and lazing around at home, right? I was shocked when he said that. Men can also experience menopause, but Ken, who has a chronic condition, hardly ever falls ill. He always took care to maintain a good condition and prevent his condition from worsening, so he probably felt I was being lazy for continuing to be unwell. No matter how much I explained my symptoms verbally, he would say, "So what's the improvement plan? If that method doesn't work, you should look for the next one. Why keep saying it won't heal? If it doesn't heal, find a way to cure it, without showing any understanding." Continuing to work in my current state is challenging. When I pleaded to take a leave until my condition stabilized, Ken, as expected, got furious. But when I told him that not only my boss but also my coworkers were pleading with me to take a break, Ken grudgingly agreed. I had decided to put even more effort into the housework while I wasn't working, but there were times when my conditions suddenly worsened, and I couldn't get up. Standing up caused dizziness, and even sitting down didn't stop the sweating, possibly due to hot flashes. Trying to vacuum would bring on unbearable back pain. I endured by taking my medicine and did the housework whenever I could move, but Ken still didn't understand. "Haven't you gotten better yet? What's the point of going to the doctor?" he said, predictably treating me more. "Hey, if you're resting and staying home, why can't you finish all the housework during the day? You can't be feeling bad all day. When I come home, there's no greeting, just dinner that seems thrown together. What are you even doing at home?" Ken complained more than once or twice upon returning from work. His attitude, sighing in exasperation, was a shock to me. There were times over the weekend, when he was home, that he yelled at me for lying down sick. "How long are you going to sleep? At least run the laundry." His sarcastic comments and complaints increased day by day, and the words of care and concern disappeared. Hurt by his terrible attitude, I increasingly wondered when my symptoms would end, if they would ever really go away. Thankfully, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who live in the same town, understood my condition and occasionally offered advice, which was a great relief. My mother-in-law is over 80, still physically strong, and very lively in conversation. My father-in-law has passed away, and she lives with my sister-in-law, Anna, and her husband. They were the ones who suggested I go to the hospital and consider taking a leave of absence if things got too bad. I'm truly grateful to them, as both of my parents have passed away, and they've been a tremendous support through my menopausal symptoms. One day, Ken said, "We're going to have a dinner party at our house next weekend for my mom's birthday." It seems that in Ken's family, it's been a tradition since childhood to have a big dinner party for family birthdays. I've participated every year since marrying him, and the celebrations have varied from going out to eat to hosting parties at his parents' house. This year, we were to host his mother's birthday celebration at our place. Naturally, I was in charge of the meal. His mother and Anna were supposed to come over in the evening, and Anna's husband couldn't make it due to work commitments. "Make sure you're feeling okay on the day," Ken said, glaring at me with a stern look. "I won't accept any excuses like last year." "Okay," I replied, unable to do anything but nod in front of his demanding attitude. Last year, I had fallen ill right before his mother's birthday party at his parents' house and had to miss it. Ken seemed to think that made him look bad. I remember being harshly scolded when he got home, crying from the pain. So this time, I wanted to make sure I was well for the dinner party as Ken had demanded. If it were as simple as just getting better, I wouldn't have been suffering for years. Hoping for a day with milder symptoms, I slowly started preparing. His mother was turning 85. Wanting to show my gratitude for all she's done, I vowed to do my best to prepare dinner for everyone that day. Hosting the family meant there was a lot to do beyond preparing the meal. Ken has a bit of a prideful side, so he wouldn't be satisfied unless the house was cleaned from top to bottom. I did my best to clean the house over several days, consulting my health as I went. Ken didn't help with the housework at all, relaxing in the living room instead, but I was used to that. In his generation, housework is seen as the wife's job. I never expected him, who thinks I'm just lazing around at home all day, to lend a hand. After finishing the shopping for the dinner menu the day before, I went to bed early, praying I'd wake up feeling somewhat better. But on the day of the dinner, I woke up with terrible headaches and dizziness. Trying to get out of bed made my vision warp, forcing me to close my eyes. Then came the intense palpitations and throbbing pain in my head. One of the worst episodes I've had recently. Despite the struggle, as I managed to get out of bed, I heard Ken's loud sigh from above. When he realized I couldn't prepare breakfast, he grabbed his wallet and phone, heading towards the door. "I'm going out to eat. And since being around you makes me feel sick, I'm going to see my mom and sister early. Make sure dinner is ready by the time we get back," he said coldly before leaving the house. It was indeed planned for Ken to pick up his mother and sister, but dropping that on me first thing in the morning would surely inconvenience them too. His thoughtless words saddened me, but I couldn't dwell on them. I drank some gelatinous drinks, took my medicine, and lay down in the living room until I felt better. However, my condition hardly improved by the afternoon. The medication eased my headache, but as soon as I got up, dizziness and instability hit me. It was about time to start preparing dinner, but I couldn't move my body as I wished. Standing in the kitchen for short periods and taking breaks, time quickly passed by. Feeling at my limit, I tried calling Ken but couldn't reach him. I then sent an email, but no reply came. Eventually, it was 5 p.m., and Ken returned home with his mother and Anna. Ken looked at me sitting in the kitchen with a puzzled expression. No greeting for Mom and Anna? Is dinner ready? Nothing set out, he said, leaving me at a loss for words. The meal was almost ready, and I'd made a simple salad with leafy greens and tomatoes. But that was about it. Fearing another outburst, my heart raced, and breathing became difficult, but I decided to apologize and tell the truth. I'm sorry, Ken. This is all I managed to do. Could we possibly order something tasty for the main dish? I'm really sorry. Upon hearing this, Ken's face turned red, and his demeanor shifted drastically. You're using your illness as an excuse even now? This dinner was supposed to be special, Mom and Anna were looking forward to it. And you're trying to embarrass me again like last year? Ken furiously scolded me. It's not like that, I'm not trying to make an excuse. But you are. It's pathetic that at your age you can't even manage your own health. You're making trouble for all of us because of your selfishness. Ken continued to berate me, ignoring my words. Why didn't you answer the phone then? I sent you a message saying I'd eat out. I even sent another message about ordering delivery just 3 minutes ago. Why insist on eating at home when you do nothing? Overwhelmed with frustration, I shouted back loudly. Each word I spoke felt like a blow to the head with a metal bat. My vision blurred so much I could barely see Ken's face. And the sound of my own voice and heartbeat drowned out everything else as sweat poured out, making me feel overheated. I regretted letting my symptoms get the best of me at that moment, but I couldn't keep silent. When my vision finally cleared a bit and I caught sight of Ken, he was standing there with his mouth agape. And then, when our eyes met, he turned bright red, glaring at me and pointing aggressively. What kind of attitude is that? Lying around pretending to be sick and not doing any housework. And then you have the nerve to snap back when called out. You're the worst kind of wife. I'm fed up with supporting someone who can't even handle the basics of being a wife. If you can't do the housework, then we're getting a divorce. His voice was loud enough to be heard outside. My desperate pleas had no effect on Ken. After years together, the ease with which he mentioned divorce left me feeling miserable and on the verge of tears. Divorce seemed the only option. As I was about to agree, light footsteps approached. But Ken, furious, didn't seem to notice. What's the big deal with menopause anyway? Tiredness, shoulder stiffness, that's normal for our age. Dizziness and headaches shouldn't be this bad with medication. You just want to lie in bed all day, don't you? Ken spat out these words when someone tapped him on the shoulder from behind. It was Anna. Showing anger like I'd never seen, Anna swung her right hand and struck Ken's cheek hard the moment he turned around. The impact of the strike from a 60-year-old woman sent Ken to the floor, looking up at Anna, confused about what had just happened. Anna, why would you suddenly do that? Ken, rubbing his cheek, looked at Anna bewildered. She glared at him sharply. And what about you? How can you speak to her like that? Have you been treating Holly this way for years? You're not a doctor, yet you decide on the severity of her illness and berate your wife? You should be ashamed. In the presence of his family, Ken would act differently, not mistreating me. Even when he was openly contemptuous and insulting me for my dizziness, Anna's visit would make him suddenly concerned about my condition, making coffee himself. I had discussed my illness with Anna and my mother-in-law but never mentioned Ken's behavior, fearing they might think less of me for speaking ill of their blood relative. They might not believe me since they hadn't seen how he treated me. Even if they did believe and sympathize, I feared how Ken might retaliate afterward. But seeing Anna's action, I wondered if I had been wrong. What's this all about? Today was supposed to be a joyful celebration for Mom's birthday. And yet, she's the one ruining the dinner by not preparing anything? Ken, now standing, pointed and continued to blame me. Then, joined by Anna in the living room, our mother-in-law glared at Ken. Is it just your personal opinion that Holly ruined the dinner party? From what I've heard, Holly did her best to prepare despite her condition. And when it seemed like it wouldn't be enough, she asked you if it was possible to change the location or order delivery. I'm not happy being celebrated by someone pushing themselves too hard due to poor health. Nor am I pleased being celebrated by a son who does nothing but complain and shove all the responsibilities onto his sick wife, she said firmly to Ken. Then Anna asked, "You left Holly alone with her bad condition to come to our house?" Well, it's not like I could have done anything. There's plenty you could do, like helping with the household chores or showing concern for her health. Didn't I tell you to be more considerate when Holly started feeling unwell? You just found it troublesome, didn't you? Anna hit him where it hurt, and Ken had nothing to say. Anna had advised Ken to be more considerate after I began experiencing her symptoms, but it seemed her words fell on deaf ears, considering Ken's usual behavior. Why are both you and Mom taking her side? Menopause isn't even a real disease, right? Getting tired or having palpitations, everyone gets that as they age. It's just lazy women who slap a disease name on it to make themselves seem sick. Ken tried to justify himself further. Anna sighed and began to explain. You might not know, Ken, but I also suffered from severe menopause symptoms. It only calmed down recently, but it was so bad I had to quit my job 10 years ago. Are you saying that a disease that forced me to quit my job isn't real? What? Ken froze, taken aback by Anna's revelation. I knew Anna had quit her job around 50 but didn't know the reason until Anna told her it was due to menopause symptoms, which led to her early retirement. She told me she didn't want to quit her job but had to make a decision considering her health first, as there was no sign of improvement even after consulting with her family. I knew Anna had quit her job around the age of 50, but I didn't know the reason until she told me herself. Indeed, I realized we hadn't met in person around that time. We primarily communicated via email, so I learned it was due to her poor health that we couldn't meet. It was truly hard, and at one point, I thought it would never end. But Noah told me to quit my job and rest. Noah, Anna's husband, who was 5 years younger than her, couldn't attend the dinner due to his irregular work hours, including night shifts. Though they seldom met, I remembered him as a kind person who always showed concern for her health. Anna, having such a compassionate husband, desperately appealed to Ken. Holly isn't your servant, you know. Shouldn't spouses care for each other more? Sorry, Anna. I knew you had a tough time back then, but I didn't realize it was for that reason. Ken replied, somewhat defensively, but Anna's expression remained stern. Right now, it's not about me. Shouldn't you be apologizing to Holly? Anna stated firmly, and Ken, looking frustrated, turned to me. Ken loves his sister deeply, so he usually can't go against her words. Eventually, he said in resignation. I was wrong. Anna's scolding woke me up. From now on, I'll support Holly, and let's get along, he said, looking into Holly's eyes sincerely, and she thought he finally understood. Just as she was about to forgive Ken, a voice said, Hold on a moment. It was my mother-in-law, who, appearing tired from standing, leaned on Anna for support and sat next to me. Then, looking directly at me, she said in a firm tone, Don't take Ken's words at face value. You should divorce him quickly. What do you mean? I asked, surprised. My mother-in-law shared her own experiences. I suffered from similar symptoms around your age. There wasn't a name for it back then. From what you've shared, I believe I also had menopause. Didn't I tell you about this before? I nodded lightly. It seemed that when my mother-in-law was my age, menopause wasn't widely recognized, making it difficult to find treatment and understanding from others. Pointing at Ken, she continued with a troubled smile. Ken, was quite harsh to me when I was suffering. That was around the time before he married you, I think. He was still living at home and would yell at me to hurry up with meals, criticize me for always sleeping, and accuse me of pretending to be sick. Recounting the past, my mother-in-law looked genuinely pained. Is that true? Still wanting to believe in Ken, I questioned him, only to have him awkwardly avert his gaze. His lack of denial spoke volumes, affirming everything my mother-in-law had said. She looked down sorrowfully and shared, my late husband was so angry with Ken's behavior back then that he hit him. And when his father scolded him severely, Ken said the same thing he says now, I've woken up. Indeed, after that, Ken stopped saying anything to me. But then he quickly married you and left home. But Holly, you've been on the receiving end of his terrible treatment, haven't you? It means Ken hasn't changed at all. Even decades later, he still shows no understanding of others' illnesses. She said this matter-of-factly, insisting that Ken's words were nothing but convenient excuses. No way! Just wait a second, I won't do it again, believe me. Ken tried to interject, but Anna stopped him by grabbing his arm. I saw it all back then. That's why I hit you just like Dad did. You apologized to Mom, crying after Dad scolded you, right? I've woken up, it was all my fault. But now, you're doing the same thing to Holly. After repeating the same mistake twice, it's too convenient to just say believe me. Ken bit his lip in frustration at Anna's admonition. As he fell silent, my mother-in-law grasped my shoulders and urged, that's why you need to divorce Ken and get away quickly. Otherwise, you'll continue to suffer. I have a daughter too. Now is your chance. Alone, he'll never admit his faults. He might even blame you for embarrassing him in front of his parents. It was heartbreaking to hear such words from his own mother. The thought of divorce at this age was daunting, but it was clear that continuing with Ken seemed impossible. Despite enduring terrible treatment, hoping that things would return to normal once my symptoms eased, it likely would have only been a matter of time before things got worse again. Rising with effort despite ongoing dizziness, I looked straight at Ken and declared my intention to divorce. Ken shrugged off Anna's hand, exclaiming, "What's this? Everyone's treating me like the villain." Everyone in the room looked at him coldly. Being regarded this way even by his own family. Ken turned red with rage and finally agreed to the divorce in a fit of anger. The dinner was called off, and my mother-in-law went home, while Ken decided to stay in a hotel. Our divorce was settled without any disputes over assets. Shortly after, I focused on recuperating alone. Half a year later, Ken, whom I hadn't been in contact with at all, called. I had moved out into an apartment and was living by myself, regularly visiting the hospital. My condition had stabilized without the stress. But Ken's call filled me with dread. True to my fears, Ken's message was selfish to the core. He claimed his chronic illness had worsened since living alone post-divorce. However, Ken had bragged about having perfect control over his own health management. He used that to criticize me, calling me a slacker with no real intention to get treated, just because my condition wasn't improving. Why's that happening? You said you had perfect control over your health management. I retorted, though I knew the reason. Ken's idea of management was shallow. Choosing what to eat from the meals I prepared. He never cooked from scratch because I had always planned our meals with his health in mind. Ken's lifestyle had plummeted in the past 6 months, subsisting on store meals and neglecting cleanliness. Such an unhealthy and unhygienic life would indeed deteriorate anyone's health. I can't keep living like this. I need you to take care of me. It's been half a year, your illness must be cured by now, Ken said without a hint of remorse. Apparently, he had first turned to Anna, but she was overwhelmed caring for their mother. Though I wanted to refuse, he was, after all, my former husband of many years. I considered ignoring him. But Ken said, "At least look at the albums I found in the closet. If you don't want them, I'll throw them away." I pondered, thinking they might be old photos. Although I've grown weary of him now, there was a time when my relationship with Ken was good, and we have photos with his mother and the rest of the family. I decided to visit our former home once to pick out my photos. The house, neglected since I left, was dirtier than before. Unemptied meal containers littered the table, making me grimace. "You see, without you, I don't even have time to clean." "It's hard to move when I feel bad," Ken defended himself unprovoked. Though he appeared surprisingly well. His desire for care seemed to be more about wanting someone to handle cleaning, laundry, and cooking rather than actual caregiving. After a moment's thought, I said, "You're not injured and seem well enough. Why don't you take care of yourself instead of slacking off?" Then, Ken, with a sullen squint, retorted, "You know my illness affects my organs and nerves, right? Don't judge by appearances. How can you say I'm slacking off when I'm suffering like this?" Hearing this, I stared at him with a cold gaze, causing him to falter visibly. Suddenly, Ken's demeanor paused. With wide eyes, he took a deep breath and bowed his head to me. "I was wrong to have said those things to you while you were suffering. I'm truly sorry and deeply reflect on my actions. I promise it won't happen again. So, please." Predicting the continuation of his plea, I promptly made it clear. "Sorry, but I can't take care of you. I'm still battling menopause symptoms myself, and I can't trust your apology." Panicked, Ken desperately begged me. "Please, somehow. Really, I never know when my condition might worsen and require hospitalization. Medication continues, but a healthy diet is essential, and I'm at a loss without you. I'm begging you, like this." Ken's apology seemed sincere from the depths of his heart. However, I had heard from his family that this was just a performance. That's something he does when he wants to claim that by not forgiving him, you're the one with a narrow heart, that you're the bad one. His mother's words echoed in my mind, prompting me to shake my head slowly. I was already overwhelmed taking care of myself, let alone caring for someone else. Resuming life with Ken and taking on his caregiver would surely exacerbate my menopause symptoms due to stress. Just when things were beginning to settle, that would set me back to square one. It's impossible. If you truly need caregiving, please use care services. I explained those options to Ken, who was still clinging on. I reiterated my inability to provide care and my intent not to live together anymore before going back to my own life. Eventually, my symptoms stabilized, allowing me to return to work from my leave. Though I considered resigning at one point, I needed to earn a living on my own moving forward. Plus, I've always found fulfillment in my work, so despite a break of over 2 years, I found joy in resuming. I have no intention of reconciling with Ken or remarrying anyone else for now. However, I still keep in touch with Ken's family, occasionally meeting them for meals and maintaining our relationship. Due to this incident, the family's traditional dinner gatherings have ceased. I also learned that Ken quit his job for some reason, claiming it was to focus on his treatment, though his clinic visits haven't increased, nor has his diet improved. With the funds from his early retirement, he has no immediate financial worries but lives in fear of an uncertain future battling his illness. I plan to continue valuing my health and living a fulfilling life for the remainder of my days.